Hey, everybody. This is Marissa Alexander, and this is Thinking Out Loud. And it's Wednesday. It's me here again with you. I think this is the last Wednesday of July. Seems like time has been flying by really, really fast. I don't know if you feel the same way, but at this point, we're literally over a year. Well, we're more than half through the year. So, a lot of time has gone by, and it seemed to have gone by pretty quickly. So, anyway, today I wanted to talk to you guys about fear in relationships. And how I stumbled across this was that I remember one of the things that people used to ask me all the time, maybe in interviews, or if they, had an opportunity to hear me speak and maybe do some questions and answers after the fact, they would always ask me, would I ever get married again? And you may have heard me talk about this before, and I've said, I believe in, marriage, and that I don't believe that the institute of marriage is in itself the problem. I just think that people don't necessarily pay attention to the commitment behind love and what it entails in a marriage, and probably shouldn't be together to begin with. So I got to thinking about that and my experiences from my past in terms of the abusive relationship and how that experience plays a part in how I move forward or has moved as I've run across different people and different things like that. And oftentimes when people experience like really tough situations or really bad breakup, betrayal, obviously some of the things that I've experienced, any level of abuse or just really messy kind of breakup or things like that, where somebody really hurt you or people was affected very negatively, then fear is definitely a deciding factor in how we move forward, and then how we um, move in relationships and what we do when we meet people and how we meet them and how we engage with them, if we in fact do engage with them. And one of the things that I realized about fear is there's a level of insecurity. And so, I believe that we all have insecurities. I believe that they range from maybe being a bit severe and problematic to just just simple. Um, there you go. It causes people to build up walls, of course, but there's physical, emotional, ability wise, and different things like that, skill set wise type of insecurities, and I believe we all have them. The range and what they are may differ to the different people, but I think we all have some level of relationship insecurity, and it's not always romantic relationship, but it's just how we relate to people, because essentially that's what relationships are. Um, what I have found in relationship insecurities, first let's just deal with insecurities. Obviously, it's not an assurance. There's not, it's secure. There's a lack of security, and that should be inward, but it's typically not. So that's essentially what the insecurity is. It should be a level of assurance and secureness, and sometimes it's just not. And what it does is it causes us to, when we're insecure, sometimes move in fear or not move at all. So I wanted to talk about this because of my experiences, and then just talking to other people as they are dating, and a lot of connections and things can't be made because we do have that fear, and we have some underlying insecurities based off of our past, and sometimes those relationship security starts in different aspects, such as like when maybe you've been judged in a way about the way you show up, you being your authentic self, you being true, and that people judge you or make fun of you, or people feel like you're off, and so sometimes that causes people to be insecure about them showing up as themselves, and specifically in relationship, because nobody wants to be judged, exposed, or whatever the case may be, but it does happen, and it doesn't go away when we get older. Obviously, it kind of we feel it and we sense it when we're growing up as kids, not fitting in and things like that. But as we mature and get older, we still have some sense of that insecurity, and some of that may have to do with social conditioning and things like that. The other thing I find with insecurity is a huge amount of rejection. You know, rejection is a mug and it stings like hell. And I don't know that I've met anybody that has not been rejected. I have met people who've gone out of their way to prevent themselves from experiencing rejection. And typically, those people don't um, get to experience a full life because they live very guarded. And I'll get to that in a minute. But nonetheless, the rejection could have happened in your past with like the parent connection, family connection, maybe at the community level. Your ex partner may have, rejected, didn't want to be with you somehow, ended the relationship in a very, you know, um, not so good way, and it was painful. Rejection on itself is just painful anyway. I don't believe we'll go through life and not have some level of rejection. And some people take it harder than others. It could have been from somebody we respected as a leader or a mentor, and that rejection caused us to really, become insecure. As well as maybe even I've seen some cases where church families and religion and some level of rejection has taken place there that's caused people to really, hold back. So when we experience that level of insecurity and we've been rejected or we have had the feeling of not being good enough, then oftentimes, as a defense mechanism, we want to prevent that from happening again. So what ends up happening, like somebody mentioned in the chat, is that we become guarded and we have a wall up, and it's hard for people to get to know you. It is hard for you to allow people in to get to know you. And I know that for myself, I definitely experienced it, and I didn't necessarily know at first, how that was showing up. And so the whole deal was to protect myself and prevent myself from happening to having to go through the situation that happened to me before. And so what it did for me was it caused me to have a bite. And I didn't necessarily consider myself bitter, but I didn't necessarily consider myself completely um, guarded to the point where it could be it could be perceived as um, offensive. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to speak for myself, and maybe you can relate to it. Um, Really short, um, really quick to shut down any type of conversation. Um, Typically, don't have a low tolerance for people just being people. And I understand having a, not be, having a standard and not essentially, tolerating certain things, but there has to be a level of balance because people are going to be people. And, I think we kind of have to sometimes give an opportunity for people to kind of validate what we may be thinking and not be basing this interaction off of our past. And so a lot of the times the insecurity will cause us to think back to a situation where we were rejected or something terrible happened in some type of interaction relationship, and that's the first thing that we're trying to prevent. And if we see anything that's even remotely close, feel maybe somebody says something, maybe somebody does something, then we are triggered in the sense, and it happens very quickly. And then we like, wait a minute, this feels familiar, and then immediately we put up a defense. And I will say this: that's not necessarily all a bad thing. It's a good thing to have um, some level of pause and discernment. But what ends up happening is that we end up having these walls to keep people out, and then we're just really in a self-made prison of our own. And so the same walls that we build are the same walls that keep us closed in. And so then, like where does the balance happen so that, we can make sure that we, are protected and using some level of discernment, and also making sure that we're not, experiencing things that we have experienced before. And so what I can tell you about that is that typically, you know, if we move in that way, we're approaching dating, we're approaching getting to know people from a place of fear. And when we're insecure because of things that have happened in the past, we will typically not give people the opportunity to see us in our wonderful vividness because we're so guarded, and it makes it difficult for a person to really get to know who we are because we are being guarded, and that makes it difficult for the relationship, even the beginning of a relationship, to kind of press in progress forward. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I basically am saying that people put up, walls and barriers as a way of protection, and that there's a need for balance, because it is not necessarily meant for us to just throw caution to the wind, but it's also um, important for us to self-examine and really understand what's going on and what we experience, because what ends up happening is that sometimes we have some baggage and everybody says, oh, we got baggage. Well, yeah, we do, but some of us are carrying bags we really should have put down a long time ago. I mean, we should have put the bags down. We should have got some new luggage. The handle broke off, we just carrying it on top of our heads like we in Africa with a basket. I'm just saying that's just how some of that looks. And it's I think genuinely people, want to be, taken at face value. And I think that ultimately what we want to find somebody, or connect with somebody who will allow us to be, our most authentic self. And moving on to the next thing, which is that there are times when we are guarded in that way, and we happen to find somebody who is patient patient enough to walk with you in understanding your past and your experience, and so they have a little bit more patience and understanding, as it relates to, getting to know you and being like, okay, well, I can see why they do that. Or, I'm just going, I may just sit here and just kind of talk to them and see where they're coming from. And at some point, as we're getting to know each other, then they will see that they don't have anything to put, their guard up about. Now, basically, what I just said is going to depend on the person's, intention. So for instance, let me say for myself, I've been on the end where I have, essentially in a past relationship, was with someone that I could tell, had some insecurities. And because I assumed that this was just, from things that they had dealt with in the past through a little bit of a conversation, I thought to myself, well, really that won't have anything to do with me, because that's not, that's, I don't do that, I won't do that, or whatever the case may be. And this is where we have to be careful, because um essentially, if a person is insecure and they have yet to develop ways to work through that and communicate, and find a way to anchor themselves and know that they, they are worthy, valued, and loved for themselves, there's just really not anything that another individual is going to do to be able to move them past that insecurity. They won't be able to fully grasp it, because one of two things will happen. One, they're going to enjoy it initially, but because they don't believe that they're good enough and that they're valued, because that's where the insecurity is rooted in, 9 times out of 10 they're going to pull away. So you'll see things like self-sabotaging, or people, finding things to kind of nitpick and kind of push people away, because there's a level of fear, and that's rooted in the insecurity, that for some reason that they don't deserve someone to see them past all their faults and failures and hangups, to love them and appreciate them for who they are. The other half of that, and I told you it was two pieces. The second piece was, when a person is patient, and they stick in there, and the person sees this and they're like, oh God, this is like great, this is like, I hadn't had this in a while, and then what they do is they become clingy. When a person who hasn't had that, they get that, they become clingy, and then you start to see that move and shift into control. So then what happens is there's a level of attachment because they're like they don't want to let it go. You will start to see people kind of second guess things when you like, because you're going to now you start moving into like the ebbs and flows, and you're kind of, settling in the relationship. And of course you're going to have differences, and you're still trying to get to know each other. And the first sign of something that maybe make you feel some kind of way, nine times out of ten, if a person has become clingy, they're going to jump on that and really kind of ride you and suffocate. And that is coming from a place of trying to control, as opposed to figuring out, having a conversation and maybe clearing that up, or making up in their mind that, hey, this is what it is. And if we continue forward, eventually it will show itself. What ends up happening with people who are moving out and become fearful, they're moving out of fear because of the insecurity. They start latching on. Then they want to over second guess everything. Then why are you talking to this guy? It's happened to me. So essentially, really quick, um, I have met a lot of guys that would deem me, somebody they want to get to know. Okay. And this is just throughout my life. And once they get to know me and everything is cool, and I'm, we jokey, laugh, and I'm pretty easy to get along with. I'm a lot of fun. I'm funny, and I'm, love sports and things like that. I'm genuinely easy to talk to. If that is not an experience that they've had in prior, what happens is they become like clingy, like, okay. And for me, it doesn't necessarily feel like that. And I could tell you for most people, it doesn't feel like that at first because it's kind of in the honeymoon phase. But then you start to see stuff like, hey, your phone lighting up, somebody sending you a message, that kind of stuff starts to appear. And that to me is somebody working out of their insecurity and basically their fear. And now they're trying to control. And so we have to really, really be able to identify when it's moving past. Let me just explain this to a person. If you feel it necessary and you all are moving in that direction, to be able to be like, oh, so and so, this is what I do, or this is my friend, and they don't have a problem answering calls in front, that whole thing, versus somebody who actually has something to hide. And I don't believe that those things take long before they start to show up. You know what I'm saying? So that's one of the main things that I've learned about relationships, in terms of being in fear. And then what happens is we move into these relationships, we're on this ebb and flow, and instead of, you know um moving in a relationship and moving in a way of love, we start moving in a way of fear. And what fear looks like is suspicious. Fear starts questioning things. Fear ruminates on things. And a lot of that stuff has nothing to do with what's actually going on. It has something to do with their past. And so those things rear their ugly head. And then at some point, if a person becomes tired of having to go back and forth with that, you may suffocate that person. You may drive them away because, like, they may be like, you know what, I can't, do anything about whatever that is that you have an issue with. And they may leave. And so there's an opportunity, where we may miss out. There's also an opportunity when that feeling, if you trust your gut and you trust yourself, shows up. And if there's an honest dialogue and conversation and an openness, then that makes room for honesty. Because typically, people who are insecure and then have trust issues tend to try to cover that up by lying about it anyway. And that just makes things worse. There needs to be some level of emotional vulnerability between the both of the people, so that, we can say stuff like, well, I feel like such and such when you do this. And so it gives the opportunity for a person to say, give you an example. So if me and you sitting on the sofa and we watching a movie and your phone lights up, and I feel like you always try to turn your screen certain times, and that makes me feel like you're trying to hide something. And they can say, well, you know what, my bad, that's not even something I knew I was doing. Instead of maybe just peeping it and then feeling some kind of way about it, and then kind of filling in the blank as to what is actually taking place. And sometimes that happens. It's like observation versus, perception. It may not be the same. But that's, if there's a conversation that can take place in open dialogue and people are willing to be honest, then that's something that, we can move through. What I have found is that people have two things. Either they have experienced that to the point where they felt foolish at some point, because whatever they thought eventually ended up coming true. And then the other thing is that they can't trust, because that's the kind of stuff they do. So when they're in there, being dishonest and hiding stuff, kind of thing, then those are some of the behaviors they display or have displayed. And so that's what I have experienced. So it's like you can't trust because you can't be trusted, because that's what you do, or you have done that whenever you've been being dishonest. And so again, those are just things that, have to take some time to work through. But I want to caution us to, when we're engaging, take a risk. And let me just say this: love, relationships, putting yourself out there, it's a risk. It's a risk. I would say what helped me was several things, and I'll get into that next week. But I'll tell you these things really quick. Was really taking the time to heal, and that was necessary, because then I didn't have a bite, and I wasn't necessarily overly guarded, um, defensive, and in some cases offensive. Not like some of these people, not all of them, I was just offensive with. Some of these people had an agenda, and they got just what the hell they asked for. But it's not always been the case, and I'm woman enough to tell you that. But there has been times when that initial concern and wall has served me well. What I'm saying to you is now is that I'm at a point where I'm balanced enough to know, and then have a conversation with myself and be like, you tripping, or what's that all about? And then there's times when I'm like, I'm trusting my gut, because I trust myself now. I know what I want. I know how I am. I know what works good for me in relationships, and I know what things I don't need to touch. And so if I sense it and it's in my gut, then I trust that. And I also pray about it. I would suggest you do that. So I'm going to go to your comments really quick. Let's see here. So can a person put up barriers and walls as a way of protection? I think I covered that. They do. We do. I don't think there's people who don't do it. I think how long that wall stays up and how thick and how tall it is going to depend on the person's experience. Let's see here. What if baggage is outright fear? Then that's just what it is. I mean, you're going to have the courage to take the risk. You it is a risk. And also the other person is taking a risk with you as well. So, I think it's a good idea to have the same level of investment. If you feel like you're pouring more, you're not getting it back, then that's a decision you need to make, because at that point you're not getting what you're putting out. But you also have to make sure that there's not a full court press on somebody who told you, no, can you just hold off for a minute and run a play and maybe do some man to man? Because if it is, then you're moving at a different pace and it's going to run people off. But we have to be honest with ourselves. I have experienced being in that position where I'm like, just take your time, slow it down, slow it down. And because, like I mentioned earlier, a person is like, oh, I like her, or I like her. I mean, kind of, all it did was make me run like hell, because I don't function well in that type of environment. But you have to know yourself to know that well enough. And I also know I'm not spending a whole lot of time trying to explain to you or show you how I roll. I'm not going to do that either. Not at that point in my life. So again, that's going to be governed by you. um do insecurities based on past experiences block your blessings or keep you safe? What's your take on that? I think I don't know if I want to use the word block your blessings, but I will say that it prevents opportunities from taking place, which you might consider blessings. But what I really think is happening is there's an opportunity for healing to take place, and we will experience that again. So if there is a block happening because of past experiences, I think what's going to happen is we're going to continue to run up against it until we get the opportunity to have the courage, um, to really dig deep and do the healing, whether that be on your own with a therapist or with somebody you trust. And then once we're able to move past that, I think then you will see opportunities open in a different way. And sometimes they do keep us safe, but again, that's a balance, because those same blocks that we have, those blocks that we put up, are going to be the blocks that's going to hold us back. So it's an opportunity for us not to be seeing, the opportunities coming our way. If we're blocked, we're blocking other people from coming in, but we're also blocking ourselves from seeing out in the possibilities and taking the courage to just take it a step further, you know. So that's that. Are you currently in a loving and caring and supportive relationship? Yes, Brian, I am. I am. And let me tell you how fabulous it is. It is with myself, with my kids, with my family. They are all so loving and caring and supportive. My management team, my bestie. I am just really fortunate. So, yes, I am. Uh, so, next week I'll probably talk about the 10 most craziest things we can do when we're insecure, and like kind of how to move out of that. I'm going to share with you that experience. But before I go, let me tell y'all about this one time, since we're talking about fear and securities and how they block you. So there was a guy that pursued me for a while, and he was very handsome. He had a presence about himself, and he seemed very confident. And I don't know if you all have picked up on this, but some of the most attractive people, or the people that are the most outgoing, tend to be sometimes I have a lot of insecurity, I should say. Me not knowing it, not really caring, you just kind of take your time to get to know someone. So I did. Over time, I would find that they took, like, if they suggested, well, I want to, come and, can we do this? And if I say, no, this isn't a good day for me, or I have something planned, let's try for another time, that person completely would shut down, just completely shut down. And I would be like, well, what's that all about? And so at some point, I gathered that they may take that as a form of rejection. So I followed up to say, hey, I didn't say we couldn't at all. What I'm saying is we're going to need to do it another day, another day. Now you're thinking that should be simple. Not for that particular person. So we ended up, rescheduling something, and we did get together. When we hung out, we had a good time. We had great conversation. Everything was fine. However, if they wanted to suggest something and do, kind of take the lead on things, and if I'd be like, oh no, because I don't, I really, that really doesn't work well for me, they continue to kind of just shut down. And so for me, it was a red flag. The next thing that happened is that they apparently were upset about something that needed to take place in a conversation, and they were waiting on me to end one conversation so they can get an answer from me. And they, instead of them just saying, hold on, when you got a second, can I get you for a second, they didn't do that. They filled in the blank and was completely upset and never even said anything. So this person completely did not say a word for about 2 hours. And so, I finally, I did kind of try to say, well, if, are you okay? And so they kind of mentioned it. And I was like, listen, that was my bad. I didn't know, just next time say something, but I needed to take that call. Anyway, the way in which they handled that was the most weirdest thing to me. So they just completely didn't say a word for about 2 hours. And so for me, that was enough for me to say, hell to the no. And let me tell you why. When you gotta at a bare minimum be able to have a conversation. And I realized that some people aren't always, really good at communicating how they feel. And I get that. But I'm also okay with someone saying, you know what, I'm just a little bit hot right now. Give me a second, or let me tell you what I'm thinking. And that's the reason why I feel that way. I can do that, perhaps. But to just completely shut down for 2 hours and act like I can't do that. And so what I found out from just dealing with that person is that they had a huge issue with, they were very insecure about being told no, or any of that. They took it as a sign of rejection when they couldn't get what they initially wanted, as opposed to just trying to meet somebody, and be agreeable and figure out a good time. And that was really, really weird for me. But there is some instances where it's that case, that level of insecurity causes that level of shutdown. And that has a whole lot of things that don't have anything to do with me. And Marissa is at the point where I'm not your therapist or Jesus Devontae Christ. You're gonna have to work that out with him. And so what we have to be mindful of is when somebody shows you that kind of thing, recognize it for what it is. Don't keep going forward. Don't think you got to over explain. Oh, he just needs to know this. I'm not telling you nothing. You don't know how to have a conversation. I'm talking to you. I'm out. Because all that does is it gets worse. And that's how some of us end up in some of that toxic stuff. And then we get really bitter later on. And then we got to really be honest and be like, you know what? He showed me he had crazy issues then. You know what I'm saying? Just a thought. So anyway, come back next week. We'll talk about those 10 things where we can kind of avoid some insecurities. We all have them. Maybe they look like that. Maybe they don't. Maybe your friends do. Let them know. And if you know a friend and you can't tell them, just go ahead and tag them in it or just share it. So make sure y'all follow me on go out to marissaalexander.com if you got any questions or if you have any suggestions for future talks. Then go out there and also subscribe so that you can get some upcoming information about my book. I start to read and make my suggestions and pull out and everything in September, and praying really hard for the manuscript to be done in October. So I'm hoping to be able to give you some inside scoop for those who are following me and who have become a subscriber on marissaalexander.com. So I appreciate y'all being patient with me. Hopefully we have gotten hopefully we should be acquainted by now. I've been doing this a minute. I see y'all coming in on some stuff. I'll follow up and I'll get online and follow up that afterwards. Make sure you take care of yourself and one another. Peace out.